"You don't belong here. Move." The words were sharp, but the slap that followed louder, harder. It echoed through Gate 17 like a gunshot. A silver badge clattered across the tile floor, spinning near the polished shoes of a stunned businessman. A few gasps rose. No one moved. Charlotte Brooks, merely 11 years old, remained motionless in her perfectly pressed military honor uniform. The dark blue jacket with its gold-trimmed lapel and the nameplate positioned on her chest identified her as a Gold Star family representative en route to receive a medal for her brother, a deceased Marine. Her face stung from the impact. The woman who'd struck her, flight attendant Dana Holloway, showed no remorse. "This isn't a costume party," Dana said coldly. "First class is for legitimate passengers." Charlotte remained composed. She didn't shed tears. She didn't shout. She knelt down, gradually, retrieved her badge, and cradled it briefly in her palm. Then she turned it over, pressing her thumb to a concealed sensor. It flashed once in blue, then red. Dana's eyes rolled dismissively. "Security will arrive in 2 minutes. Perhaps then you'll understand." "You should probably contact the Department of Defense instead," Charlotte responded quietly. Her tone was steady, measured, remarkably calm for a child who'd just been assaulted. Within 60 seconds, the terminal illuminated irregularly, and an overhead speaker crackled into action. "Notice, Gray Flag Protocol has been activated. Joint operations temporarily suspended at this gate." Everything ceased moving. Across 9 airports nationwide, military-linked systems initiated immediate lockdowns. Flights were redirected. Boarding was canceled. Charlotte remained standing alone, dust marking her sleeve, badge restored to her chest, wordless. But within that quietness, the power dynamic had fundamentally transformed. And Dana, she remained oblivious to what she'd triggered. 60 minutes prior, Charlotte Brooks occupied a secluded spot in the VIP lounge at Fort Liberty Airport, ankles crossed properly, hands resting in her lap. Her military honor uniform was immaculate, the nameplate gleaming, the Gold Star badge positioned precisely above her heart. Travelers walked past, scarcely acknowledging her presence. Some offered brief looks before continuing. Others gave courteous smiles, presuming she belonged to a school initiative or perhaps was dressed for play. A woman wearing high heels murmured to her spouse, "That's probably for some parade or ceremony." Nobody inquired why she was present. Nobody questioned where her guardians were. But Charlotte had grown accustomed to being overlooked. She observed a digital timepiece above the terminal entrance, counting down toward her boarding time for the flight to Washington, D.C., where she would receive the posthumous medal granted to her brother, Corporal Adam Brooks, who'd perished 3 months earlier in Helmand. This wasn't the sort of journey one anticipated with excitement. Charlotte wasn't a boisterous child. She disliked being the center of attention. But this trip transcended comfort. It represented honor. Her father had told her that morning before departing for base. "Your brother represented something meaningful, and today you do as well." She'd remained silent then, merely nodding. Now, sitting in solitude, Charlotte traced her thumb gently across the badge's edge, an oval of polished silver engraved with an eagle and 3 stars, a parting gift from her brother before his deployment. A boisterous laugh interrupted her contemplation, someone nearby mocking a child dressed in military attire. She refused to turn around. Instead, she rose, straightened her collar, and proceeded toward Gate 17 with calm, determined strides. She remained unaware that within less than an hour, that gate would become eerily silent, that an adult woman would assault her before dozens of witnesses, that 9 airports would darken at her touch. All she understood was this: she bore her brother's name on her chest, and absolutely no one was going to declare she didn't belong. Dana Holloway had worked first-class routes for more than 18 years. She'd developed the ability to identify them, the genuine passengers, those who belonged. The custom-tailored suits, the watch that quietly announced six figures, the pristine shoes, the relaxed confidence that accompanied knowing your social position. And she recognized equally well who didn't. She termed it the instinct test, 5 seconds maximum. Posture, attire, vocal tone. It succeeded 99% of the time. Therefore, when Dana noticed the small girl wearing military-styled clothing near the first-class queue, pulling a simple navy duffel and clutching what resembled a prop badge, her instinct screamed no. Children didn't belong in that section, not unless accompanied by someone significant. And this one, no guardians, no luxury luggage, no VIP escort, just a solemn expression and large brown eyes that didn't appear frightened, though they should have. Dana positioned herself before her, palm extended. "Sweetheart, the queue is for first-class travelers," she stated with a strained smile. "Are you certain you're in the correct location?" The girl maintained eye contact, unwavering. "Yes, ma'am, I possess a boarding pass." Dana didn't bother examining it. The document appeared authentic, but she'd encountered numerous sophisticated forgeries. Unentitled parents upgrading their children, wealthy families attempting to push boundaries. What truly irritated her was the badge, that gleaming little piece of metal attached like a theatrical prop. Dana had seen enough staged reverence to last indefinitely. "Where are your guardians?" she inquired, tone firmer now. "Traveling separately," the girl answered calmly. "You're not military, and you're not first class, so move aside." The girl remained stationary, and for the first time that day, Dana's instinct wasn't providing the expected signal. Something about this child, something unsettling in her unwavering composure. Still, Dana did what she habitually did. When someone resisted, she seized control. She elevated her voice. She dismissed the girl with a wave. And when words proved insufficient, she raised her hand. The queue at gate 17 had grown increasingly tense. Charlotte held her position, boarding pass still gripped firmly. Dana Holloway's voice had progressed from courteous to cutting, her tone reverberating off the walls like an alarm. "Move aside," Dana hissed. "You're delaying the queue." The girl remained motionless. People behind them shifted uncomfortably. A man wearing a blazer checked his timepiece. An elderly woman muttered something regarding today's disrespectful youth. Nobody spoke up. Nobody questioned the badge's significance on Charlotte's chest. Dana reached for the badge again. Charlotte retreated, grasping it with both hands. "Please don't touch that," she said softly. "You think you can display some counterfeit pin and board a first-class flight?" Dana snapped. And then, without warning, the strike landed. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't a tap. It was a full, open palm strike that sent Charlotte staggering half a step sideways. The terminal became silent. The businessman behind her dropped his beverage. A flight attendant across the counter gasped audibly. Even the gate agent's fingers froze above their keyboard. Charlotte didn't weep. She didn't scream. She reached down, collected her badge, and calmly secured her boarding pass in her uniform's front. Then, wordlessly, she slid one finger beneath the badge's baseplate. A crimson light pulsed once. A gentle electronic tone echoed overhead. The boarding screen flickered, then darkened. The status bar blinked red. Gate 17 under protocol lockdown. All operations suspended. Security personnel looked around, uncertain what was occurring. Dana stepped backward, confused. Charlotte looked up at her. Her voice was gentle, almost excessively calm. "You may want to contact your supervisor and the Department of Defense." In that instant, Dana's complexion drained of color. A wave of whispers rippled across the terminal. Charlotte didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because in 57 seconds, 9 airports would halt, and every individual in that terminal would finally pose the same question. Who is she? Gate 17 remained motionless, too motionless for a major airport. Phones began ringing behind the gate counter. The jet bridge illumination blinked off. One screen now displayed in bold red, Gray Flag Protocol Level 2, awaiting command clearance. Nobody comprehended what that signified, but they recognized it wasn't standard procedure. Dana Holloway took an unsteady step backward, her confidence rapidly dissolving. This has to be some error. Charlotte remained silent. Instead, she took a seat in the gate area's corner, crossed her legs as she had in the VIP lounge, and extracted a small encrypted tablet from her duffel. A login screen materialized, facial recognition accepted. She tapped once. Miles distant in a glass-paneled office overlooking D.C., General Donovan Brooks glanced at his vibrating phone. He didn't react when he viewed the alert. Charlotte Protocol activated, Gate 17. He exhaled through his nose, composed but focused. To everyone else, he was the Deputy Director of Homeland Security's Joint Aviation Oversight Division. To Charlotte, he was simply Dad. He picked up the secure line. Connect me to FAA command immediately. I want the gate frozen, the staff isolated, and the backup team deployed discreetly. Civilian panic level remains at 0. Behind him, a digital map blinked as 9 airports illuminated red, signaling an automatic response linked to a single access badge. Charlotte's. Back at Gate 17, Dana Holloway was still offering excuses to the gate agent who had ceased listening. A woman in uniform approached Charlotte, military-grade headset, no airline insignia. She whispered something. Charlotte nodded once. The woman turned and headed toward the captain's cabin. Passengers began murmuring. Charlotte sat quietly, hands folded, observing the chaos unfolding around her. She wasn't attempting to frighten anyone. She wasn't enraged. She simply wasn't going to permit the world to pretend her brother's name held no significance. And, thanks to the man on the other end of that call, the world was about to remember it. Within 20 minutes, #Gate17 was trending. Initially, it was a blurred photograph, a young girl in a military-style uniform seated alone while crew members scrambled behind her. The caption read, "What did this child do to shut down an entire gate?" Then came the videos, clipped from smartphones showing Dana Holloway striking Charlotte, followed by the eerie dimming lights and boarding screens blinking out. Someone uploaded the audio from the overhead announcement. Another added subtitles. By the time Charlotte looked up from her tablet, CNN, Reuters, and 2 local stations had already requested access to her Department of Defense profile. But access was locked. Not denied, not restricted. Locked, meaning national-level redacted. People don't receive locked files unless they're connected to something far more significant. By the time Dana realized the severity, it was too late. Her photograph was everywhere. A screenshot from the video, her hand raised, face contorted in frustration, captioned with, "She slapped the Gold Star child." She hadn't known who the girl was. This woman works first class. Charlotte, still seated, watched without expression. Not a smile, not a tear, just quietness. The man across from her, a former Navy veteran in a ball cap, leaned over and asked softly, "Was it your brother?" Charlotte nodded. Helmand Province 3 months ago. He put his hand over his heart. Semper Fi. Charlotte whispered back, "Thank you." Dana, meanwhile, was being escorted aside by 2 uniformed men she didn't recognize. Not airline security, not TSA, genuine uniforms, federal grade. Silence. The gate agent stepped away from his station, speaking into a radio, nodding slowly. Around them, whispers transformed into stares. Nobody defended Dana now. Charlotte stood up, brushed off her sleeves, and walked to the window. She wasn't attempting to destroy anyone, but some lessons need to be public, particularly when the entire world forgets that even the quietest passenger might carry a name worth saluting. Charlotte sat in a private security room, her small form dwarfed by the oversized leather chair. A cup of water sat untouched beside her, condensation pooling on the table. Two men in dark suits entered, not airport personnel, not even Airline. These were from the Federal Aviation Ethics Division, a joint task unit few people had even heard of, let alone encountered. The taller one sat down first. "Charlotte Brooks," he said, voice calm but observant. "We know who you are. What we require now is confirmation from you." Charlotte nodded. No fear, just posture straight, shoulders set the way her brother had instructed her. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Authorization Alpha November 7. That was it. One sentence, and the tablet in her bag chimed. The men exchanged glances. Within seconds, the overhead screen in the room flickered on. It displayed a federal seal, followed by 5 lines of redacted text, and then access granted. Skylock clearance level 4. ID, Brooks, Charlotte, Unit 17. The shorter man leaned forward. "Charlotte, do you comprehend what activating the gray flag protocol signifies?" She looked him directly in the eye. "It means 9 airports suspend operational authority until the FAA and DoD jointly review the event." "And you understand who possesses the ability to trigger it?" "Yes, myself or my father." Silence. Back at Gate 17, Dana was being escorted off the floor in silence. No apologies, no farewell speech. The passengers had cleared the area, but not before someone projected the news coverage onto the airport wall. Her photograph loomed over her exit, frozen in shame. She had no idea that Charlotte's badge wasn't a toy. It was part of Skylock, a classified federal identification system designed for dependents of high-risk defense personnel, particularly those who had received posthumous honors. The badge carried an ethics override token, enabling the bearer to flag real-time airport violations for federal review in moments when dignity or protocol was breached beyond civilian measures. Only 3 children in the country possessed it. Charlotte was one. The man with the tablet asked gently, "Why did you activate it?" Charlotte paused, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted her words to land precisely right. "I didn't activate it because she struck me," she said quietly. "I activated it because she dismissed my brother's sacrifice as if it meant nothing, because she called my badge fake, because she looked at me and saw a child with no value." The room fell quiet again. The taller agent finally leaned back, released a long breath, and said, "The protocol is valid. No violations on your end." Charlotte didn't flinch. "She asked if I was pretending to be military. But I'm not. I'm family." Meanwhile, at a secure FAA terminal, General Donovan Brooks stood before 6 individuals from the FAA, Homeland, and Department of Defense. Each held a folder. None had opened it yet. He began speaking. "My daughter did not overstep. She followed Skylock ethics protocol precisely. That protocol exists because 2 years ago, another Gold Star child was removed from a flight for wearing a uniform. Nobody acted then. We didn't create this system for publicity. We created it to prevent shame from becoming policy." A younger executive at the table shifted. 9 airports locked down. That's substantial. Brooks looked him directly at him. So was the cost of silence. Back at the airport, news outlets were beginning to shift their narrative. Charlotte was no longer the child at the center of the shutdown. She was now referred to as Charlotte Brooks, daughter of General Donovan Brooks and sister to fallen hero Corporal Adam Brooks. A new clip was being shared rapidly. It showed Dana rolling her eyes just before the strike, paired with text that read, "When arrogance meets consequences." At the gate, a quiet announcement echoed. Boarding is now resuming at Gate 17. First-class passengers only, beginning with Miss Charlotte Brooks. Dana was gone. The crew was replaced. Charlotte stood, badge gleaming like steel under the light. She didn't walk faster or slower than usual. She just walked straight past the whispers, past the stairs, onto the plane. And when she sat down in 1A, not a single person questioned whether she belonged. Not anymore. By the time Charlotte's flight departed, Dana Holloway's world had collapsed in less than 3 hours. It began with a temporary suspension notice handed to her on the tarmac, brief, cold, and unsigned. She barely had time to process it before her airline credentials were revoked in the internal system. When she attempted to log into the crew app, her profile read, "Status under federal investigation. Do not assign flights." A security guard escorted her out of the restricted area. No ceremony, no apology, just silence. Simultaneously, the internal HR chat room of Falcon Air exploded. Crew members shared screenshots of the video. Former employees began sharing anonymous stories about Dana's tone, her attitude, and how she always acted as if she owned the first-class cabin. And then came the boardroom call. The CEO of Falcon Air was already facing pressure from the FAA after being notified that the airline had failed to complete mandatory bias training for senior crew members, training that should have been renewed 8 months ago. This single moment had opened a backlog of negligence. Worse, the gray flag protocol activation had automatically triggered a system-wide ethics hold across all Falcon Air-operated flights passing through federal air corridors. That meant 9 airports delayed Falcon Air traffic by 3 hours. $6.7 million in commercial partnership contracts were temporarily frozen. Their Sky Priority access at 2 major terminals was suspended pending review. The communications director attempted a soft spin. "We're conducting an internal review and remain committed to dignity and inclusion." But it was too late. Social media wasn't waiting. Meanwhile, inside the plane, Charlotte sat quietly. A flight attendant, not Dana, offered her hot tea and a blanket without saying much, but her eyes carried what words couldn't. Respect, not pity. Respect. Across the aisle, a businesswoman leaned over and said, "I hope you know how many people needed to see what you did today." Charlotte replied, almost a whisper, "I didn't do it for them." Pause, but I'm glad they were watching. Back in Washington, D.C., General Donovan stood before a closed-door panel. His tone was firm but calm. "This isn't about a slap. This is about a culture in the sky that has allowed uniform judgment to override basic human decency." The FAA administrator beside him added, "The Skylock system was built for moments like this. It worked, and now we're requiring all federal air partners to submit to a 72-hour ethics compliance audit." When asked directly whether Falcon's licenses would be affected, Brooks didn't flinch. They already are. A different terminal, same day. Dana sat alone in an unmarked conference room, waiting for a hearing that would determine whether her actions disqualified her from future FAA certification. There were no lawyers present, no union representative beside her, just a silent screen on the wall displaying "Pending Review, Violation of Section 17-C, Ethics Clause, Respect toward Identifiable Protected Parties." And above it, her own hand frozen in midair, captured from a still of the viral video. She tried to explain that she didn't mean it, that she was under pressure, that the girl looked like she was pretending. But the truth was simple. She didn't ask. She didn't pause. She just assumed. And now the system she once thought would protect her was exposing her instead. Back on the plane, in the air, Charlotte looked out the window as clouds blurred by. Her badge sat quietly beside her, light turned off now, protocol ended, systems back online. She wasn't angry, but she was changed, and so was the system that had ignored girls like her, families like hers, for far too long. As the captain made a soft announcement about turbulence ahead, Charlotte whispered to herself, "Let them feel it." Not because she wanted revenge, but because some turbulence teaches what smooth skies never will. The press conference wasn't supposed to be public, but after 3 federal agencies and 2 Senate committees got involved, transparency became the only option. At exactly 2 p.m., in a room lined with American flags and FAA insignia, General Donovan Brooks stepped up to the podium. His uniform was sharp, posture locked, his face the same calm steel that once commanded missions overseas. But today he wasn't here as a general, he was here as a father. "Let me be clear," he began. "Charlotte Brooks did not violate protocol. She activated it, and the system worked because it was designed for the exact moment where dignity is denied, not by threat, but by arrogance." A journalist raised a hand. "Sir, can you confirm who authorized your daughter's Skylock credentials?" Brooks didn't blink. "I did, after she buried her brother." Gasps moved through the room. "Corporal Adam Brooks, Marine Corps, KIA, Helmand Province, March 9th. Charlotte was 12 when she received that badge, not as a gift, but as a designation. She trained for months. She passed simulation reviews higher than some TSA agents. She earned it." A second reporter asked, "Is she still active in the system?" He nodded. "As of today, she remains one of only 3 civilian miners with Level 4 Skylock access." Then he paused, leaned closer to the microphone. And if the airline had simply listened, if that crew member had paused to ask instead of slap, none of this would have been necessary. Across the country, airline boards scrambled to recheck compliance, to download training materials they'd long ignored. At Falcon Air HQ, the CEO watched the broadcast in silence. Then, without saying a word, he picked up the phone and requested a meeting with the FAA Compliance Council. Because this wasn't about one girl anymore. This was about what happens when silence meets a badge backed by truth. 3 days after the Gate 17 incident, the FAA released a statement that rippled across the entire aviation industry. No flashy headlines, no dramatic music, just a quiet memo labeled "Implementation of the Dignity Protocol, effective immediately." Inside were 4 pages that would reshape how airlines operate. Every major U.S. airline was now required to complete quarterly ethics training, not just for flight attendants, but for all personnel with passenger interaction. Any crew member found violating ethics policy toward a Skylock-designated dependent would be placed under immediate federal review. The FAA would publish a quarterly passenger ethics compliance report naming airlines that failed inspections. Most notably, the Skylock badge system, once secret, was now officially recognized as a protected federal designation backed by Homeland Security. Charlotte's name was never directly mentioned, but insiders knew, and when the document was published, her ID number, Brooks, Unit 17, was listed under active designations. At a small press table that day, a retired airline captain was asked how he felt about the new regulation. He leaned forward, thoughtful. "I've seen war heroes fly coach without complaint, and I've seen folks in first class act like royalty. But that girl, she never raised her voice. She never needed to." Pause. That's what real strength looks like, and now the skies will finally start to remember that. Back in D.C., Charlotte sat at her bedroom window, watching jets pass overhead in silence. Her badge was tucked safely in a drawer now, but its echo was already rewriting how an entire nation flew. By the end of the week, 9 countries had requested access to Skylock protocol documentation. Japan sent a formal inquiry. Canada issued a preliminary ethics review for all domestic carriers. And in London, Heathrow's Operations Board voted 6-1 to suspend partnerships with any airline that failed to comply with passenger dignity standards by the end of the quarter. The ripple had turned into a tide. News outlets shifted tone from the slap scene round the terminal to the girl who grounded 9 airports and rewired the skies. But Charlotte didn't care about headlines. She was back in school, quiet, uniform ironed, badge put away. When her history teacher mentioned current events and used aviation ethics reform as an example, Charlotte kept her head down. She didn't want applause, she just didn't want it to happen to anyone else. That evening, General Brooks knocked lightly on her door. "There's someone on video call asking to speak with you," he said. "International." Charlotte walked to the screen. A calm, elegant woman appeared. Behind her was the flag of the European Aviation Commission. "Miss Brooks," she said warmly, "we'd like to invite you to speak at the Global Passenger Ethics Forum next month in Brussels." Charlotte blinked. "I'm just a kid." The woman smiled. "And yet you reminded an entire industry what grown-ups forgot." Outside, a plane soared through the sunset sky. For the first time in years, Charlotte looked up, not with grief, but quiet pride. Some changes don't roar in with engines. They land quietly, but they stay. The ballroom at the Global Passenger Ethics Forum in Brussels was filled with delegates from over 40 countries, suits, flags, cameras. But all eyes turned as an 11-year-old girl walked onto the stage, not with a dramatic entrance, but steady steps and a quiet breath. Charlotte Brooks adjusted the microphone. She didn't look down at any notes. "You don't need a badge to know when something's wrong." The room hushed. "What happened to me wasn't rare. That's the problem. It was normal. And sometimes normal needs to be interrupted." She paused, looked out at rows of airline executives, federal regulators, and ethics officers. "My brother taught me that silence can be dignified, but sometimes silence lets people keep getting hurt. So I used my voice." Another pause, this time softer. "And if a kid can change something with one badge and one decision, what's stopping you?" A full minute of silence followed, then a standing ovation, not loud, but long. 1 month later, the Passenger Ethics Accord was officially signed by 23 nations. The FAA released the Gate 17 Ethics Framework, named in quiet honor of where it all started. Dana Holloway's FAA license was permanently revoked. Falcon Air was placed under mandatory federal oversight for 2 years. And Charlotte? She returned home, back to school, back to her quiet world. Her badge stayed in a drawer now, locked, protected. She hoped she'd never need it again. But across the world, signs went up in terminals and training centers. Dignity is not optional, it's policy. And every time a crew member glanced at those words before a flight, they didn't know the girl behind them, but they knew better to ignore the next one. What would you have done if you were in Charlotte's place, just 11 years old, but holding the key to ground a whole airline? Tell us where you're watching from and let us know. Do you think dignity in the skies can ever be truly enforced, or is it still just a privilege for the few?